Hola, buenos días. It's really wonderful to see everyone here today, virtually of course, and welcome to week 2 of the Innovation Academy for Women of the Americas. We have a really exciting week planned focused on women in STEM, as well as a deeper dive into our topic of women, climate, and power. Our first session this morning is with Maestra Sandra Begay. And Sandra is someone who has been very important in my life. She has been a mentor to me professionally and personally, and she helped me when we first started the Academy in 2016. So I consider her a godmother for this program, and now she will be a godmother to all of you. I'd like to take a few moments to tell you a little bit more about Sandra. Sandra Begay is the daughter of a Navajo tribal leader and a public health nurse, and is a member of the Navajo Nation, which is an indigenous tribe here in the United States, and she has been an engineer for 32 years. Sandra earned an Associates of Science degree in pre-engineering, a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering from the University of New Mexico, and a Master of Science from Stanford University in structural engineering with an emphasis in earthquake engineering. She has worked at Sandia National Laboratories for 29 years, where she is a research and development engineer. In 2019, Sandra took a leave of absence and worked for the City of Albuquerque Mayor Tim Keller as the city's environmental health director. Before Sandia, Sandra worked at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and Los Alamos National Laboratory. These laboratories that I'm mentioning are some of the biggest laboratories in the United States for innovative science. From 2002 through 2018, Sandra formally mentored American Indian interns through the Sandia Department of Energy Indian Energy Program, which she created. She is proud to have mentored 42 technical American Indian and Alaska Native college students, which included 24 women interns, and that means 60% of her interns were women. The interns have become highly regarded technical staff members and leaders within tribal organizations, industry, academia, and nonprofit groups. Sandra has enjoyed 16 years of unique work focused on technical assistance to United States Indigenous tribes. Sandra is featured in the American Society of Civil Engineers book, Changing Our World, True Stories of Women Engineers. Included in the chapter, Women in Power, Sandra's efforts were described as providing electricity through solar panels to hundreds of Navajo members. It is my great pleasure to present to you Maestra Sandra Begay.
Hi, good morning to everybody. I'm hoping you've had some cafe, to be able to, just get started on a Monday. I know your academy activities this week will be fast and furious, but I think starting off this morning, I wanted to maybe set the tone for your week of meeting other women in STEM. So I am a tribal member of the Navajo Nation. Navajo is the largest tribe in the United States as far as land that it occupies. It's in the state of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and just a little corner of Colorado. There's about 300,000 Navajos that are enrolled with the tribe. We are matriarchal, so everything with Navajo culture is handed down by our mothers. And as women, we hand down our traditions to our daughters, our nieces, and the women. We're born as a gift to our fathers. So my clan is the Zuni clan of the Navajo. It's called Nanishteje Tachitni. And then I'm born as a gift to my dad's clan, which is the Bitter Water clan, which is Tachitni. And so having these pieces of yourself, you got to know how you're related to people. And, you know, when you're young women, you have to know who you're related to and who you're not, because you're not supposed to be dating anybody you're related to. So one of the other things that you should know is that I come from a specific part of the Navajo Nation within New Mexico. So right on the state line in Gallup, New Mexico, there's a big interstate that goes through Gallup. So a lot of people know Gallup because they usually take a stop to get gas or something to eat, but we're known for selling Navajo jewelry within the town of Gallup. So I think what you need to understand about being matriarchal is that it's been a long time. 30 years ago now, 30 years ago last month, I lost my mother, and that was a very hardship to me because we lost our matriarch in my family. And so having to grow up without a mom was very difficult. But I will say my dad, as a tribal leader, tried to teach me about leadership and how to be a very good person and try to help people. My mom was a very strong woman, so she would just not sugarcoat, not try to be diplomatic about, you know, you need to change that shirt because it doesn't match what you're wearing. She was very direct, but I don't mind that because I knew she was teaching me. And so I appreciate the guidance she's given me, even though I only had her for a short term in my life. So that's where I get the drive that I have to be in the field that I'm in. So in the United States, of all the US engineers, I'm one out of 13,000. So if you filled like an arena where people play soccer, football, basketball, they're usually about 13,000. They're a big facility. If you put all the US engineers in there, I would be the only Native American woman in that whole stadium. So that's the number that I know. And that's why I said, sometimes when you go into STEM, when you're a minority or woman of color, a brown woman, you're going to be one of the only for all of your career. Now, how should you take that? It's like a big hindrance. Is that too big of a challenge? In my career for all these 30 years, I'm going to say, no, it's not that. You need to reinterpret, need to understand it differently by saying, instead of I feel I'm very different, there's not very many of me, the type of engineer that I am would be to say, I'm very unique. I'm very blessed. I'm given lots of opportunities because of who I am and what I represent. But that doesn't mean I don't do the job. There's a little story that people talk about is that you can put a fish into a pond, but that fish still has to swim. So maybe some of the jobs early in my career, they put me as a fish into a nice bowl to swim in, but I had to swim just as much as the other fish, right? So when you work, you might get a wonderful opportunity of a job. That doesn't mean you sit back. That means you need to work and maybe even work a little bit harder. In my first jobs, there were no women, no brown women, except for me and the secretary. And it was assumed when I first started that I was a new secretary. And I had to learn diplomacy about, no, I really don't want to get you a cup of coffee, but if I go get a cup of coffee myself, I'll get you one too. All of those things you might say are subtle, but you have to learn how you want to deal with those kinds of issues. Even correcting the assumption that I'm the new engineer in my department. When I had my first job at Los Alamos Labs in northern New Mexico, there was one other white woman in my whole division. Everybody else was a man and mostly white men. So it's just very interesting when you get into these situations to be able to hold your own, to really know who you are. So that's why I elaborate a little bit about myself. Navajo culture really tells me that I've been honored to talk to you today. So in that honor, I describe who I am and the credentials that I have, because in Navajo, we don't just let anybody get up and talk to the public. You have to show your credentials, why you were asked, sort of prove who you are before you get into the meat of the talk of the information you want to share. And that's why I asked Danielle to be able to give a little bit of my credentials on my behalf so I could just jump into what I wanted to share with you today. So one of the things I think to understand is that We all have people around us that have influence on us. And I've learned that you need to really get close to those who are positive, who will give you encouragement. We have a little cartoon called Winnie the Pooh in the US, and you might know of Winnie the Pooh, but he has a little pal, he's named Eeyore, and he's a donkey, and the donkey's ears are always down. And he always seems to have like a black cloud over his head. And when he talks to Winnie the Pooh, Pooh will ask him, "How are you today?" And he'll answer, "Oh, I don't know. I think it's going to rain today." And he's always in that mood. And so I think I'm trying to give you the information to say, if you have people who are like an Eeyore, who are negative, don't have a good attitude, you need to try to minimize your time with them, because that aura, that spirit of them can get to you and your attitude. So you need to get away from folks like that. And honestly, it's going to be a tough road in STEM for a brown woman. That's what I meant in my talk, that the odds are against you. But that doesn't mean we can't succeed. We need to understand, maybe from a person like me, that yes, you can do this. And yes, you might have some really interesting projects to work on throughout your career. But the trick is you got to get your degree, and then you've got to prove yourself. So the first years, at least 2 to 3 years in any job, you're going to have to prove yourself, that you are building your reputation. You need to work hard, and you need to try to do a little bit more than others. I know that's not fair, but that's just the name of the game. I'm being quite honest with you. You're going to have to work real hard to build that reputation. Why is that important? Because it pays off. After you've built that reputation as a professional, then the managers will look at you differently. Oh, she actually knows what she's doing. It's like, of course I do. Look, I used to put my diplomas in my office because I didn't want to be known as the secretary, right? I have a degree from the University of New Mexico in civil engineering. I put up my master's degree from Stanford University. So I didn't have to say that I have these degrees. It's like, well, look on the wall, that's who I am. I don't do that anymore because I've proven myself. People already know that I have these credentials. Otherwise, I wouldn't do the job that I have today. So part of that is understanding the mantra of working hard in your first initial years as a professional. But what turns out to be really good is that as you build a reputation, then the doors start opening to you. The other trick I've learned, and it's interesting, it's a trick because people don't teach this to you. You sort of have to find it out yourself. I'm an introvert, which means I don't talk a lot. I do a lot of thinking. I've learned to be an extrovert. I've learned how to talk in public and give presentations. I do that because I practice. And if it's important to me, I'll practice even harder. And I will gear myself up. So like if I have to go to a networking event, I'd rather not go, but there's a reason why I should be there. So then I'll say, okay, let me give myself a pep talk. Let me go into this reception. Let me go into this conference, and I'm going to talk to people I don't know, which naturally for me is like, oh, I'd rather not, but I have to they call that putting yourself out there. It's because that's what you do to be able to have a dialogue with people. Now, I'll give you shortcuts. I'll look for somebody who looks like me or I might know, and I'll go up to them and start talking. Then I'll get more comfortable. Then I'll ease my way into somebody I don't know. But at the end of that kind of event, as an introvert, I just get so tired and fatigued. I have to just not be around anybody, and I don't want to talk to anybody because I gave all of my energy to that event. So just know that about yourself. Understand how you communicate with people. Most people can be either extrovert or introvert, but you have to come out of that normal and try something new. So if you're more extrovert and talk a lot, that in some forums when you're in a small group, you may have to be more quiet and listen, versus an introvert is like, I'm still listening, but I have to say something because I can't be quiet. That's not the point of being there. So knowing that about myself, what I didn't know is you're supposed to talk about your work at work with other people. I just thought I work, I talk to my colleagues, I talk to the customer, I get my work done, I'm doing my job. My manager says, well, Sandra, you're doing a good job, but your colleagues don't know who you are. They don't know what you do. I said, was I supposed to tell them that? He said, well, yeah, because what's happening is that every year you're evaluated for your work. So you can either do a good job and they'll give you more money or a bonus. So that's the way you get a better rating, is that if your colleagues know what you're doing, then you can do a better job. I didn't know that. Nobody told me that, right? It's like being in a class and somebody's grading you on how many questions you ask in the class and you didn't even know you were being graded. So it's sort of that unspoken rule. You got to speak up, you got to talk to your colleagues, but you have to have that balance of, oh man, she talks too much about her work all the time. And I've had that in my career because I went the extreme end. You told me to talk about my work and now you're telling me I talk too much and I need to listen more. It's like, all right, you strike a balance. But the other part that I also didn't know I learned, you know, your colleagues know about your work. Me as your manager knows about your work, but the other managers in this area need to know about your work, because we look at the whole pool of engineers every year, and then you're put in this category of high performer, good performer, okay performer, poor performer. And you've got to have a reputation where if somebody doesn't work with you day to day, but I've heard of her, so yeah, I've heard she does good work, then you might be put in a different pocket to get more funds, get more money. So it's interesting that you study real hard in school and you do your homework, but when you get out, people pay you to do your homework. They pay you to think about things and take on challenges. They pay you to think about how to analyze the situation and bring up a solution or a set of solutions. And that's sort of what you learn as you go through the rigor or the discipline of the STEM fields, is that there's a whole issue of teaching your mind to be analytical. Some people are not analytical naturally, but you learn how to be. Now, I guess I'm fortunate, I say blessed, that I've always been analytical my whole life. So when I was 10 years old, I lived in a boarding school, and I lived there when I was in 4th grade or so. And we used to have to get up in the morning and we'd leave our dormitory and walk outside and march. We'd actually march in rows to our cafeteria or somewhere to get our breakfast. Well, when I was that young, I had really long black hair, and we'd wash our hair every day. And I just was miserable because I was cold in the winter. I didn't like going outside with wet hair. And I thought, there's got to be something different than just marching in the cold. And I must have been like, let's say, Disneyland, and I saw a monorail. So in my mind at that young age, I thought, instead of being miserable and having to walk in the cold, we should just build a monorail and be done with it. And that would solve our problems. And so that's the first thought I had that young about analyzing things. And also, I think, forming an attitude of, yeah, there's something I don't like and it's a challenge, rather than just harping on, I don't like this, and just not being negative, is to think, well, what can I do to change it? What could I suggest to make things better? And then when I was in 7th grade, I learned about blueprint drawing, learned about rendering buildings in a 2-dimensional way on paper with a pencil. We didn't have CAD, we didn't have computer aided design software. We had to do it by pencil and paper. Well, I know myself, I can draw a very good straight line, and that's a good attribute for an engineer, right? When they had to do it by paper, now we can do it in the computer, no big deal. But I knew myself, I'm not artistic. I'm just very introverted, analytical. Many people think Native Americans are all artistic, that we can make jewelry, we can weave rugs, I can paint. That's not me. I'm Navajo, but I don't have any of those attributes. I can make traditional food, but I can't weave a rug. I have no children. So if you judged me by just through Navajo culture, by somebody who really believes in traditions just as they were way back in the day, I would not be a very good Navajo. I don't know how to weave. I don't know how to butcher a sheep or a lamb. I can take the meat after it's been butchered and cook it really well, but I don't know how to butcher. I did know how to herd sheep. I never lost a sheep, so my grandma taught me well. I don't have any children. I'm not married. All of these things, traditionally, people could judge me that I'm not very good being Navajo. Now, I can speak a little bit of Navajo. I can get the gist or understand a little bit of a conversation, but I'm not fluent in Navajo. So I could be judged by that too. But does that hold me back? No. In my mind, that's you, other person. You're judging me by what you define. I judge myself by what I define. I'm Navajo. I'm very proud of it. You can't judge me by any other measuring stick than my own measuring stick. So I'm hoping you understand that about, you got to understand yourself and really help yourself feel better about what you're doing. Because the other thing I'll let you know is that you're going to meet hundreds of people in your lifetime who would rather not encourage you, who want to be discouraging, who want to tell you this is too hard for a woman to do this. I didn't know women could do math. I mean, I've heard these crazy things over time. It's not right. We all know that. That's a false. That's a lie. That's not true. But people will think that in their mind, so you have to change them. Oh yeah, I know how to do math. I took 3 semesters of calculus. I know trigonometry. I had 2 semesters of physics, 2 semesters of chemistry. It's like, yeah, we can do it. But it's hard to be always defending yourself in these fields. And it's because we're so unusual. The odds are against us. That's why I say we have to really try hard to understand ourselves, be strong in who we are, and understand what we bring to the workplace, to the job, to the project, because people need different kinds of thoughts to approach challenges that we have today, because the challenges ahead of us can be very, very difficult. So most of my career, I was a facilities engineer. So I was either the civil lead or a specialty of structural engineering. Structural engineering just means we don't want the building to crumble or fall down because of lateral loads, which what is a lateral load? It's the wind trying to blow a building down or an earthquake trying to knock it down. Earth moves, the building moves around and wants to knock it down. Well, you learn the techniques, you learn the formulas, you learn all you can about how to keep a building up during earthquake. Now that's a specialty. Do I do that today? No, I do not. I've moved into different areas in my career. Why is that so? Because I've done a good job and I get to move into different areas. So I was not only a facilities engineer for 3 different laboratories. I did the same job, but I moved into something different called strategic planning, where I worked with the executives at the labs. Where is the lab going in 20 years? How do you tell the federal government this is what you want to do? Why are you the best lab to do this? How do you tell your corporate sponsor that runs the lab that you're doing a good job? Well, I was the gopher. I was the one that did all the PowerPoint slides for the executive, and I'd hand it over to them and they'd present. What I learned is that people, even at the executive level, when they're really high up in the company, they're just human. They're just people. They get nervous, but they learn and practice to present, shake off the nervousness and present. But I got to see all of that behind the scenes because I was, when I say gopher, I mean, go for this, go for that, do whatever task they wanted me to do. That was my job. The next opportunity I had was in renewable energy. So there was like a little tiny project to help the Navajo Nation with solar panels for individual houses. And so the federal government had given some good money to Navajo Nation, and it was my job that we made those systems work the best that they can. And so over time, those units are still out in the field generating electricity for these small households. And I really enjoy working on that type of project because it helps people who don't have electricity to be able to get like a refrigerator. Because if you have refrigeration in a rural community, that can be life and death. You can have medicine that you can store, you can buy fresh and better food if you have a refrigerator. If you don't, then you're eating things that are preserved, have all those things that keep it in a can, and that's not very healthy. I don't know a lot about what type of systemic type of illnesses that happen to folks in Mexico, but for American Indians and Alaska Natives, we have a lot of diabetes, we have a lot of heart disease, we have a lot of isms that people can't cope, isms like alcoholism, drug addiction, mental health issues. Now, I'm not denying that those are true, but I can't solve all of those problems. There's specialized people that need to address those in the community. I can do my part with technology and with electricity, but the other thing I focus in on is keeping myself healthy. I don't drink alcohol, and that's because I have diabetes. I have to really watch myself. I have to watch what I eat. I don't partake with any drugs. I have a security clearance where I work. Means the federal government can share very secret information with me if need be, because I led such a squeaky clean life. I mean, that's the nature of a security clearance. So I practice this by people know I'm a law abiding, I don't break the law, I don't abuse drugs, I don't drink, and that's me. And that's how I fight all these things that happen to our people that really gets them into a difficult situation. Now, I think learning how to see things in a broader perspective, I think that has led me to a few things that I do today that I think you should be aware of, is that when we want to make things better, okay, we do a good job, we have a good reputation, but we need to also think about service to our communities. So I serve on two boards that are very, very important. One is the University of New Mexico Board of Regents. We are the bosses of the UNM president. We make sure the university has good policies for the university. It also includes a hospital. And so in my mind, what we're trying to do with hospitals is try to create a space where we teach young people, children, early on to have very good health, have good eating habits, to exercise, because I see the opposite end of that. We're having to build a new emergency room for our hospital because the one that we have is too small. And so that's the problem. Are we going to stay stuck by just building bigger and bigger emergency rooms, buy more ambulances? No, we'll do that, but we need to go the opposite end. Can we teach our young people, maybe we shouldn't eat as many hamburgers through the drive-through and stop eating French fries? I'm sorry, but French fries will kill us in the end. You just have to sort of know these things. As a diabetic, I can't even smell a French fry and my blood sugar goes up. I have to be very, very careful. And so trying to teach, like my niece and nephew, here's the better way to eat. Don't be drinking any drink diet sodas or water versus Coca-Cola, Dr. Pepper, Sprite, too much sugar. And so that, in my mind, is going to help the communities understand, if you can teach young people who are more open-minded to eat better, then later on, I don't have to try to build another emergency room to help take care of people. So I wanted to leave a little bit of that for you as a bigger picture of what we have to do to help our communities. The other is, I think, being, and I hate to say this to you, but because you're going into a field, because you're going to go far in your academic career, by default, you're going to be a role model. People are going to watch you, and unfortunately, people are going to judge you. And so kind of keeping that in the back of your mind, just be the best person you can be. But even I get a little frustrated, and I'm in public meetings and people in the public are allowed to say something at the beginning of the meeting. Sometimes I just can't take it. I just have to say something. I mean, I'll be as patient as possible, but if people just keep eating at me and eating at me about this or that, I have to defend a little bit of myself. I used the word, I come from humble beginnings, and that was turned around in the newspaper to say I'm an aristocrat. I say cat facetiously, aristocrat. And I thought, me? A brown woman at the table has to prove why I got to the table? And it was even jokingly said that this is the words we have in the United States right now. I need to acknowledge my privilege for being at the table. I think that's just silly. It's like, you shouldn't be eating away at a brown woman who's finally at the table. It's like, there's only been 3 Native American women in the whole history of UNM, which is like at least 150 years old, that have served on the Board of Regents. And so what I want to say is stop picking on me. And so I've had these dialogues with other women at a national level. I said, I'm using this as an example. Sometimes things get to me. I said, but the way I kind of feel like it's happening is all over the world, women were trying to break this glass ceiling, right? People talk about that, is that we can't move up. We just see it. We see it through the glass, but we can't break through the glass. It's like, darn it, we've broken through that glass, but I'm telling you, there's a phenomena, there's something strange about what's going on, is that I'm getting cut from that glass that I broke. And I don't think that's right. So that's kind of an issue we're talking about in this group of women, about these kinds of things that shouldn't be happening, particularly to minority women, brown women in the US today. That's just not right. And so when I talk about how do you improve the community, I love being a part of groups that we talk about these things about. This should not be the way it is, because I don't want my niece, let's say she gets into a field where she's very unique. I don't want her getting cuts by people who just feel like, I'll have to say something to you because you shouldn't be at the table and a brown woman shouldn't be at the table. It's like, no, we're not going to do that. It ends with me. Let's put it that way. That kind of stuff ends with me. The next generation, I don't want you to have to put up with any of that. It's just nonsensical. It's just stupid. And I thought I wanted to bring that up to you because there's some dialogue that women who are professionals are having right now. And I thought I'd make you aware of that.